And it's the end of the music part of the program.
Yeah.
Welcome to Real
Uh,
Monsters once again. It's Thursday night,
it sure
and
is.
I'm SK Barrett, and joining me as always is the lovely and talented Wes Hobrick.
Hello, hello, hello. Hopefully, we can provide a bit of a much needed distraction considering yesterday
You
in the
know,
news cycle.
I'm really glad that we get to not talk about that,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
except to say this, and it's not directly related to the subject of current events, and that is social media is a sewer. It just
Yeah.
is. It's a sewer, and you know, take a break, get away from it, push the keyboard away, turn off the TV, go for a walk. It does not
Absolutely.
need your attention.
That had me thinking, and I had been thinking about this for a little bit. Somebody should study fully do or however many it is, shared delusion.
Yeah.
Somebody should study that with social media and see if that makes it more virulent. I would bet it does, but it'd be interesting to see what science would say about that.
Oh, for sure. Well, social media is probably almost certainly enabling, um, volatile partners to find each other more readily.
Yep. Oh, yeah, definitely. It's much, much easier because of
Um,
it.
yeah. So let's start off as ever with the M of the week. And here she is,
Absolutely.
um, posing on the back of the sofa. She's such a little
I may
shithead.
have to refresh. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Picture's not coming up on my end, but oh,
What?
there it is.
There, it should be there.
Yeah, I see it now. Aw.
I was out,
I
and I was out driving today, and I saw a pupper that was like a color negative of M. Like where she was brown, this
Oh
dog
well.
was white, and similar type of breed, and it was running loose, and there was like three cars pull over, like going after this dog, trying to catch it and save it and find its way home and everything. It's one of the things I like about this area is that people are just you don't see neglected dogs. And
Very good.
my oldest daughter wanted to volunteer at a shelter, and they said we don't really have any animals. They
Oh,
they don't.
that's good.
The average stay is less than a month.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know. I don't even know what those stats are here. I'm gonna have to look after the show, see what I can find. But
Um, we need to put up
Ah,
The
yes.
warning. Um,
Disclaimer
yeah,
on these.
we have some pictures again this week of crime scenes and bodies,
Hmm.
and so if that bothers you, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah. Hey, that's an excellent point. And just to tack on a bit with that, it's not blood in these pictures.
No,
If that is what turns, oh, I'm talking to the people who are listening,
yeah,
Um, that's not what's in these. So if that is what turns you off, but just seeing like a body under a blanket doesn't, then you could stay if you want.
yeah, we have crime, yeah, uh,
Hmm.
dead bodies. That's what we got,
Yeah.
but not
Yep.
like they're not like gutted or slash necks or anything like that that you can see.
Yeah. Most of them, in fact, are draped with blankets.
Most of them,
Hmm.
and low angle, so it's really, you know,
Yeah.
it's not awful, but some people, who knows? You wander in here off the street and you say, "Hey, let's take a look at real monsters." And who's this Ripper guy? And
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hate to use the word trigger warning, but I think it's fair to, tell people what you're going to be getting here before we get into it. Absolutely.
for sure.
Um,
So I'm gonna start off with a
yep.
little story.
You would love to hear it.
So back in when I was in seventh or eighth grade, I started I got an address of a girl in England, and we started becoming pen pals. Um,
Cool.
yeah, and she lived in a little town in North England called Bradford in Yorkshire.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
going to be important later.
yeah,
Remember that name, people.
yeah, Bradford. And so what's really it's just astonishing to me that here I was in Seattle in the mid to late 70s where we had a fairly notorious serial killer on the loose
Yep.
writing to a
Not
young
just one.
well at
What? Oh, I was just going to say, what year did Ridgeway start? I'm going to have to look that up
he
while
was
you're telling.
in my mind I associate him more with the 80s.
That's true. When it got a little more intense.
Yeah. Um, but here I was writing to this young lady in Bradford, England, where this guy, Peter Sutcliffe, was running rampage. We both had serial killers in our communities, and we are, these, I don't know, not completely oblivious, but unaffected, I guess might be unimpacted might be a better way to put it. But we both had
Hmm.
serial killers in our communities while we're writing to each other,
Hmm.
at the same time. It was so bizarre.
I wonder what the stats are on uncaptured ones in the UK. For instance, it's estimated by the FBI and the DOJ that at any given moment there's about 50 serial killers that are active in the United States who have not been caught. Um, so I would
Wow.
just be curious what that is in England, what theirs looks like.
And would they
Like, yeah.
even want to make those numbers public? They're kind of they kind of take a different tack towards law enforcement and what's proper to make public and that type of thing, which we're going to get into a little bit because it had a very disastrous impact. The police attitudes had a very disastrous
Yep.
impact on the this case.
Oh, and not just police, but media too,
Right.
and how they wrote about it specifically. But I think maybe it might be instructive to get into a bit of the economic situation that was happening around this time too. In
True. Was this the time of the coal strikes and all of that?
It was the coal strikes and the other countries, places like China, driving textile manufacturers
Oh, yeah,
out
yeah.
of business in Yorkshire. So Yorkshire actually was a world capital for textile manufacturing after the Second World War, but that slowly got eroded as there was more competition and less cost going other places.
Right.
And
So,
I mean,
yeah,
we have.
unemployment was incredibly high. I mean, so
Mhm.
so what was the unemployment rate in the U.S. during, say, the Depression?
Oh, that was. Man, I'm gonna have to look to
It was in the 20s, I
on
think,
that
right?
one.
20 something percent, maybe up to 30.
I thought it was about 25
Yeah.
for some reason.
That seems reasonable. I mean, in the ballpark anyway. Well, in
Um,
in Yorkshire during this time period that we're talking about, which is the mid to late 70s, they had
24.9% in 1933.
yeah, and in Yorkshire it was like 22%.
Yep, that was a huge thing. And then you also had around this time OPEC, the
Oh yeah,
Organization of Petroleum in exporting countries.
the oil
They, I think,
embargo.
yeah, which had the effect of, wasn't it doubling the prices or was it even more than
Oh,
that?
more than that. Because
Maybe it was quadrupling the price
oh,
of a barrel
easily.
of
Yeah,
oil.
it went from pretty in my community, it went from pretty much 25 cents a gallon to over $1 in a matter of months.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's
absolutely.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the other huge problem with that is that it greatly exacerbates inflation. It makes everything more expensive when gas
Right.
and
Yeah, it's not
um,
just
the
the
like
cost of
is.
your getting around. It's the cost of getting everything around. And
Yep,
and getting the raw materials to the factory, getting the finished goods from the factory to the warehouse, and from the warehouse to the distributor, and from the distributor to the retailer. And it
yep.
all becomes, you know, to massively more expensive at the same time as there are fewer people who can afford to buy your products
Hmm.
because of
Oh
the
yeah.
the layoffs and the unemployment.
Holy hell. 9% inflation in the UK. Now to put that
That's
into,
crazy.
yeah, it
I
just
mean,
had me thinking for people who don't know much about Germany before the Second World War when it was the Weimar Republic,
the
there was so
hyperinflation
much inflation there. People would literally push shopping carts
of
full
cash.
of Deutsche Marks
Yeah.
to get a loaf of bread, you
Now,
know?
at the same time, to provide the context on the other end of even farther out on the scale, I should say, you have places like Venezuela where the inflation and countries that like that in the past that have had inflation rates of like 100% or 200%. So
Yep.
it's not that bad, but it is not good.
No, not at all. Yeah, and I mean, when it gets to like the Venezuela levels is when they stop counting money and start literally weighing it
Yeah.
on a scale. Um, but yeah, it's pretty much avoidable too, inflation, if you get good policy in there. And I think that's kind of what Margaret Thatcher was trying to do when she was elected prime minister
Yeah, yeah, she did
during
a
all
good job of that.
this.
Um,
Yeah,
so
the
so they
Iron Lady.
so Yorkshire was in trouble economically.
Yeah.
Much of northern England.
Why don't we, if we could, show the map of exactly where it is?
Where is the map? We'll show the larger map here.
Yeah, to give people an idea. And then if we have a few of those that show some of the buildings, we could maybe show that for people to get an idea. But I mean, yeah, it's sad. All the money left when the businesses left and the more affluent moved to other suburbs and boroughs around, London
Right.
and the other cities. Yep, there is Yorkshire with Leeds in, well,
Yeah,
bottom
The
center.
kind of the Leeds region is what we're going to be talking about.
Yep,
Now,
we have that one blowed up too, if we need
before I
it.
show the other one, I want to mention this little place near the last city at the top. You can see Newcastle upon Tyne.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna that's a that's a town that will factor into the police incompetence.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. That's the thing that I don't get through all this, because you have with the ultimate tally for Sutcliffe, you have a total of 13 murdered and another 7 who were attacked by him and survived.
Yeah.
Uh, you'll hear a lot about how this was the largest manhunt in British history, but when you know just how incompetent the police were with a lot of this, and when you remember that they had the Moors murders that we were dealing with only 10 years before this, they
Right.
should have handled it better. Um, I don't know with that. But yeah, I mean, Sutcliffe, one thing that gets me with him, doesn't he look like a vampire? Like a 1980s vampire? Uh, but yeah,
You could say that.
yep.
Let me pull up. Let me. I gotta. I think he looks like a '70s magician.
Yeah, I can see that too.
Let me
Uh,
find one that I think shows that.
but his actual occupation was as a truck or lorry driver, which he went over quite a few. And you know what is really interesting about that? During the middle of the investigation into the 13 deaths, when police were combing, the countryside far and wide, they actually talked to Sutcliffe 9 separate times. And at his work, literally, they were joking with him and calling him the Ripper, his boss and the employees. So,
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, there's the picture of the magician look. Doesn't he look like a
he,
'70s magician?
he does with that gigantic bow tie.
The
Uh,
amazing
I am not a
Sutcliffe.
fan of the bow tie, personally.
No.
I like regular ties, but yeah, that is our guy, and we actually have a picture of him, I think, in the truck too, with Clark Transportation
Yeah,
on the
we've got.
side. Um, and I'm sure that doing that left him enough time to cruise and to hunt for the most part. Although he didn't use any of the lorries that he drove to kill these women.
No.
not at all. He did, with one of the victims, though, use her van. And this woman fits the victimology of the Yorkshire Ripper in that he targeted prostitutes or women who he thought were prostitutes. And quite a few of these women, it is reluctant prostitution. One of
Mm-hmm.
the one of them, in fact, was only hooking to get money to make sure that her husband didn't go to jail after being bankrupt.
Which was
Um,
still a thing in England in those days.
yep,
Debtor's
there were still
prisons.
debtors' prisons, exactly. Um, but his first victim was a mother by the name of Wilma McCann. She was the blonde, I believe we have her picture.
Yep,
Um,
coming right up.
that was his first actual murder. His first documented assault was in 1969. This murder was, however, in, I believe, 75 when he went after Miss McCann. And his weapons of choice in this murder and all of them in the future, and the 7 attacks I mentioned, were always a ball peen hammer and a Phillips head screwdriver.
So,
And what he
so
would
he was.
do,
Yeah, please.
what he would do with that, as he refined his MO, was to basically blitz attack them with the hammer,
Yeah, it
and
was an
then finish
ambush,
the stabbing. Yeah, exactly.
and
And it,
and that
mm,
a profiler would get a lot of information out of that.
oh yeah, I mean absolutely they would. And when you look at the actual wound patterns of the screwdriver, of course you can see that it's Phillips head
Hmm.
because of the cross
Right.
and because of the depth. But the other thing that Sutcliffe liked to do as he was stabbing them was get the screwdriver in and slowly twist it.
Mm,
So you're talking about serious
damage
sadism here.
and not
Um,
clean wounds. Not easy to repair.
yeah, yep. But those
And
were his weapons.
and the thing that I would take away if from the um, MO is that he's a small guy.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
he needs to ambush and disable as quickly as possible because he's little.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's definitely fair. And in fact, his shoe size, I didn't look at for his height, but his shoe size was only a 7.5, which is small for a man. Um,
Hey, I'm not a really I'm not a I'm like average height, and I wore a 7 in like 7th grade.
and yeah, exactly. I think that I probably did too. But in my feet right now, I wear about an 11. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it really does tell you a lot with the stabbings and using a screwdriver and the hammer. But the first victim, he does that. They come in and they, scrub the crime scene for anything that they can get, blood, semen, etc. But like pretty much all of his murders, he never was able to leave a seminal calling card, um, which leads me to believe that he was impotent.
By the way, I found the Netflix series on the Yorkshire Ripper. It's called the Ripper, by the way.
Hmm.
I found it to be pretty good.
I thought so too. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
And it's remarkable how many of these men that we have covered in this series become murderers because they lack the social skills to relate to women.
Hmm.
And
Oh, I
even and
couldn't
even
agree
though
more.
and even though Sutcliffe was married, he still had that problem.
Oh yeah, and he absolutely did. And the his marriage was actually to a paranoid schizophrenic woman. In fact, as far as I could tell, as of this date, she's still living in the house that they lived in.
Wow.
Um, but when you have somebody who is as impaired as to get that diagnosis, you wouldn't really have to have, a lot of skills to talk to the opposite sex, in my opinion.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Um,
but yeah, I definitely think that he had those issues, and he is likely, I think, also impotent. And
very likely.
you see that. Uh, we talked about it before, specifically with Andre Chikatilo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was thinking.
yeah, where he would gut his victims and truly rip them. And you saw Sutcliffe getting more and more violent in the vein of Chikatilo. I think that you could compare them together, in fact,
Mm-hmm.
to where if Sutcliffe had been able to kill more, his crimes might have looked a lot like Chikatilo's. I don't think he would have been a cannibal, but the other stuff, like just the absolutely horrible brutality on the sex organs and the breasts of these women,
Right.
because that's where he would target, stab them there, as many lust murderer does too. It's the symbolism of it
So
all.
so why do you think he used a screwdriver instead of a knife?
I honestly, I don't know. Maybe opportunity. Maybe it's just what he had with him, and after his first kill, he decided to hold on to it. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, how do they regulate knives over there?
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I was in England in 2006, and I thought, it'd be kind of cool to bring a souvenir sword home. And I talked to my
Hmm.
host over there, and she said, "Oh no, you can't get those unless you're a dealer.
Oh wow. Wow.
You can't buy a sword in England unless you're a registered collector or dealer." Um,
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah, and the regulations on knives are uh, pretty onerous too, but that's been a gradual development. Um, and so
I wonder.
I don't know if how bad it was in the 70s, the regulations.
I wonder if it might not have been hard for him to get a decent knife because his wife and her diagnosis.
Or he didn't want to keep
If
one
maybe,
around.
yeah, that could be too, because he
That's a good
was
point.
afraid of, suicide or self mutilation
Or
by
coming after
her.
him with it.
Yeah, or exactly. Yeah, that too, because it was paranoid schizophrenia
Right.
that she had. Um, but yeah, the first was Wilma McCann. They talked quite a bit about her on the series that you mentioned on Netflix at the beginning, and how she had two children.
Four
Her
children.
daughter,
I
oh
thought three
yeah,
or four
four
children.
children. Yeah, four total, but only two still with her in the house. I think it was.
Okay.
Um, and one was her little daughter, who was about, I think, 4, and the big brother, who was, I think, 5. And the night that she went missing, she went out to, meet friends at a local pub. And when she didn't come back till about 5 o'clock in the morning, the kids looked at the clock and the sister says to the brother, Mom's not home. We have to go find her. So they literally go out in the dark looking for her. Um, but of course, they don't find anything in her body. Turns up only about 150 yards from the residence from where she lived.
She almost made it back.
Yeah, yep. And Sutcliffe must have grabbed her nearby. Uh,
And the police immediately latched onto the idea that she was a prostitute.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing that they still stayed with, had the tunnel vision with, were myopic about up until his trial after they caught him. Um, and that goes back to a very loose definition of it as well, because basically, if he saw a woman who he thought had loose morals, he would think she was a prostitute.
Mm. Or just out at the wrong hour, right?
Oh, he would default to prostitute, to
Yeah,
assuming that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, Miss McCann, I do not believe was hooking. Um, could be wrong on that. I was just checking my sources there.
Well, I don't think she had any rests.
Yeah, I don't think she did. I was just looking to see if there were any other evidence of that. But yeah, that was in 1975.
Hmm.
And then his next murder was January 76. And that was Emily Jackson, 43, and a mother
Pardon me.
again. You okay?
Uh, sorry. I'm just choking on my own spit.
Oh,
What a
as
way
long
to
as you're
go.
all right. Uh, uh, yeah, and he's ended up stabbing Emily Jackson 56 times with that screwdriver. It's just incredible overkill.
All right, so uh, I'm gonna. One second.
No problem.
I was just wondering about the connection between, the cause and effect possibilities between his impotence and having a paranoid schizophrenic wife. Um,
That that very well could be. Um, I mean, definitely. And him later on getting that diagnosis himself, which we'll get a little bit more
yeah, that's a
into
little
that. With
coincidental for my liking.
yeah, oh, me too. Um, there's real questions there whether he was malingering or not.
Hmm.
We talked a bit about that on the show, and all it really means is faking a disease to a medical professional. Um, and in this case, after his trial, it was a total of 3 psychiatrists who came to the conclusion of paranoid schizophrenia.
Yeah, but going home
Oh,
to a lot of
apologies, my
crazy.
mouth is dry.
If he had
Um,
if he had to go home from work to a woman who was, you know,
severely mentally ill.
yeah,
Yeah,
severely mentally ill, and all that would entail in dealing with that, and then you kind of can. It's kind of pretty easy to connect the dots to from that to stabbing this woman 56 times.
Oh yeah. Oh, most definitely. Um, and it could also connect the dots to him malingering about the diagnosis with himself,
Right.
because he did have, like we were talking about, a case study, to look at and copy what she was doing.
And listen, um, my mother was bipolar,
Hmm.
and one of the things that I have said, and when I've had questions about that, is that no, I'm not bipolar, but I know how to act like one.
Oh yeah, I know how to fake it.
You know,
The
I know how that behavior goes. I can do that if I wanted to.
Oh yeah, hey, there's no doubt about it. I honestly, I don't know whether I believe that he is sane or insane, but um, and he tricked the three psychiatrists, and he had his wife that he definitely could have studied with that. But I just don't know if he had the intelligence to implement it and do it right. Uh, but who knows with that? The big basis as well for that diagnosis was a story he told about when he was 16 and a gravedigger in a London cemetery.
Oh, that is such a
Um,
bogus story.
yeah, I think so too.
Tell the story.
He's digging this grave on a hot summer day, and he's in the middle of it.
And he's
You
what,
know,
six? You said 16?
yeah, 16 years old.
Okay.
And he decides, because it's hot out, he's sweaty, that he's going to take a break for a minute. So he puts his shovel down and is sitting on the mound of dirt around him inside the grave still. And all of a sudden, he said that he heard a voice. And he couldn't understand so much what the voice was saying, but it was unmistakable to him. So he crawls out of the grave and he looks around, and the voice seems to be emanating from a tombstone. And somehow, finally, he gets the message out of that tombstone that he is to enforce God's law, that he is on a quote mission from God to get rid of the problem of prostitutes on the earth, to smite them all. He is the avenging angel. But
Mm,
I thought it was hilarious. Um, Ian Brady, which we know that I used that book, his book, The Gates of
right.
Janus, quite a lot as a source.
By the
He
way, for
actually
the
knew.
people who might be unfamiliar, Brady was one half of the Moore's murder killing team.
Yes, which the Moors series only happened 10 years before
Yeah.
Sutcliffe. But Ian Brady, so they were in the same prison together for a while, and they played a lot of chess. And Brady got to know him, and he believed that he had schizophrenia. But he said about their first meeting, and the first time he talked and said that he was on a mission from God,
Hmm.
uh, Brady said that that reminded him of the Blues Brothers.
Well, when you use those terms, yeah,
Yep, absolutely. That famous scene with
it's
James
it's
Brown
an
and
iconic phrase.
oh man. But yeah, I mean, you had those two killings. The second one was in the same area, and he ended up killing this woman in one spot and then dumping her body in an alley. And the bit of a difference here with the MO with this one was he spread her legs wide open when he had her out there, to where anybody who walked into that alley, if they found her, would immediately. Um, And
Right.
then
So
getting
he
into
had
the
he hadn't
uh
posed
huh.
any of the victims prior to this. Is it true?
No, no. With the second victim, he posed her. But yeah, with the first one, no, he didn't. Uh, the third one, though, had a very interesting type of posing, and I honestly don't know what to make of it. They found her in a dog park with her feet facing toward the road and her head facing away from it. And she was face down, and Sutcliffe had taken her boots off and set them neatly on the back of her legs. And then he rifled through her purse and didn't spill the contents out, but took time to neatly array them around her body.
Oh,
And to me, that says that there was something special about that victim to him,
sure.
that
That's
she
easy to
was
take
somehow
that.
different. Yeah. Um, saying there's no real other explanation I could think of as to why he would do that. Because it would, I mean, it would be a pretty large chunk of time that he would have to take out to do that too, when he could have ran away and gotten away from that one. So that was how they found her. She was pretty young. I mean, she wasn't as young as his other victim, who was, I think, number
16.
6 or 7.
Yeah.
Or yeah, she was 16 and a bag girl at the local supermarket, and he killed her when she was out walking home. I guess he again thought she was a prostitute, but yeah, Patty says about that third victim, strange but personal. I agree. It does say something about personal, but it also says something that he posed her with her face down. Um,
Right.
if it was
Yeah,
something
that's
physical about her, yeah, absolutely. Um, if there was something physical about her that he liked, he would have kept her turned up, I would think. But or maybe it was a form of undoing for him, that he thought she was special, and he was ashamed about what he had done to some small degree, to where he flipped her over to where you wouldn't have to see the face.
or he knew her
Uh,
and did.
yeah, that could be too.
Um, and by that I mean, being a an ambush attacker, he wouldn't have seen her face until after he had killed her
Hmm. Or
with the
if the
hammer.
hammer blow didn't kill
Yeah.
her, yeah, after he stunned her or killed her.
But I don't
Uh,
think there's any evidence that he knew her, though.
yeah, I didn't see much either. And Sutcliffe, when they finally arrested him on a, well, we'll get to that later on why they arrested him, but he gave pretty detailed confessions to most every single killing.
Yeah.
Um, and pretty much all of these women were poor, were destitute, and a lot of them had families that they were trying to take care of, and more of a few of them did. And they lived in these, quite frankly, slummy areas of Yorkshire and Manchester.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing that Sutcliffe did as he got further along in the series. He took a page out of American serial killers' playbooks, and that is hopping into another jurisdiction to do a killing.
Right.
Um,
But he was not as effective in confusing the police as, say, a Bundy
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, I mean he was not as good with that, and I think that goes back to him not having like exceptional intelligence like Bundy did.
And he didn't go all
But
that far off, really.
no. Yeah, I mean he crossed into what was essentially the next county south.
Yeah. West.
Um west, yeah. But yeah, and he did that, and I'm not saying at all that Sutcliffe was an idiot or low IQ, but I just don't know if he was smart enough to fake that diagnosis.
No. Yeah.
Um, but at any rate,
I
if
think I
he,
think he might have been smart enough to know the like a few of the key behaviors to mimic.
hmm
And one thing that sociopaths are generally quite adept at is mimicry, because that's how they learn all their social interactions is through mimicry, because they don't none of it comes natural to them.
this is true. Just like the ones that we've often talked about who practice in front of a mirror
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
Uh,
And some of them are
yeah, I
much
mean,
better at that than others. Um, you know,
hmm
Green River Killer guy, which why can't I remember his name all of a sudden?
Ridgeway.
Ridgway, he was not good at it, but Bundy
No.
was exceptional.
Oh yeah. Very, very understanding of any sort of social milieu that he would find himself in.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, Sutcliffe definitely learned and refined himself. He was smart enough to do that with the murders. And the police, they couldn't catch him. And I found this really interesting when they started soliciting for leads. They got so many. And remember that this is still the age of paper filing, paper records. They got so many leads, so many tips that they literally had to reinforce the floor under the room where it was housed.
Yeah,
Structural engineers said,
they they had so much paperwork it threatened the structural integrity of the
yeah,
police building.
yeah. And they had a structural engineer who said that you have to do that or else it'll collapse. So, um,
Well, okay, so if we want to talk about the police investigation, my overall impression of it was um, they made the Keystone Cops look good.
yeah, that is definitely an accurate summation there. Um,
But okay, so on the one hand, he really didn't leave evidence behind.
no, I mean that.
Because he was impotent. There was no semen. Um, there
hmm
was there's no weapon. There's no fingerprints. He barely touched him. Right?
Yeah,
He didn't touch anything of
yeah,
theirs. Almost never. Didn't leave any fingerprints. No hair. No fibers. No nothing.
hmm
He
Well,
attacked
and
in
what?
the wee hours of the night, in the dark, away from, you know, were public places.
hmm
There was real. I mean, to give the police a little bit of credit, there was really terribly little to go off of.
Oh yeah, and basically all they had from the crime scene was a tire print, which doesn't tell you much of anything because it was a very common tire. Uh, they had that, and they had a boot print, and that
Right.
was it.
That being said, they also ignored survivors' testimonies
Yeah,
because Sutcliffe attacked some women who didn't die.
Yeah, 7 survivors.
7 survivors. So he
Total.
wasn't all that good at what he was doing.
No. And what gets me with that, the first survivor that reported to them, she had been in a coma after being hit. She said that she couldn't remember a face, she couldn't give them a description.
But she heard
But
his
the
voice.
second, yes, she did. She heard his voice, but the second survivor who came forward was able to give them a description. And now we have this sign up of the pictures right now where it says, help us, find the killer. And it has a sample of handwriting because they thought there were, letters from him coming into the police. And then listen to his voice doesn't refer to that witness, but it refers to a tape that police refused or received, not refused.
A couple.
That
They got a couple of tape recordings and letters,
yeah, oh, absolutely.
and
The
they
tape
made
recording,
snippets. They made snippets available all to the public, saying, and their thinking was somebody will recognize this voice.
yeah, yeah, and they put it up on this traveling billboard. But what really gets me about this, and it's kind of enraging too, they had a sketch of Sutcliffe, which I think we also have a picture of.
I don't think we
Hey,
do.
oh, I thought I sent that one. But that sketch that the second survivor was able to give is essentially a dead ringer for him. I mean, it is that freaking close to how he looked. But they didn't bother to put it on their fucking billboard.
Yeah,
I don't know
they
why you would do that, and I don't know why they wouldn't do that.
well, one of the it ties into it's of the same mentality. So the second the one survivor who heard him speak said he was very clearly had a Yorkshire accent.
Mm-hmm.
And they completely discounted that because of this audio tape that was sent in that had a accent that they called Geordie,
Mm-hmm.
which
That
was,
a linguistics professor called it that.
well,
Yeah.
everybody who heard it knew what it was.
Well, yeah, that's
It
true.
was it's
The
people from the area know exactly where that accent's from, and it's from
yeah,
this town called Newcastle upon Tyne, which is like halfway between Leeds and Edinburgh,
mm,
and so because they had this, the police latched onto this audio recording and these letters because they were like, you know, desperate for anything that they could work from,
yeah,
and
and they
that they didn't even question the authenticity of it.
no, not at all. And come to find out, the audio tape in particular was bullshit,
Yeah,
total and complete bullshit. Uh, and still they put that up there, and I can't wrap my mind around how you could be so stupid as to not put the sketch up there. Um, so they had that sketch in every single police station in England at the time. So
but
why
but
wouldn't
not
you do
but
it
they
there?
and I don't even think they put it in the papers.
Wow, that is incredible that they would withhold that. Um,
And you know, it actually, in a way connects back to our previous episode about forced confessions. And
mhm.
in this in the in the in the mentality of the law enforcement, in that they wanted they wanted this to be the truth, and they were
Mm-hmm.
just going to drive until they made it be true. They were going to
They get
find
so myopic.
somebody. They were going to find
Yeah.
somebody who fit this that they could pin it on.
Yeah.
They weren't looking critically at these juicy bits of evidence that were false, completely
Mm-hmm.
bogus, and they ignored every. There were statements from police who had evidence that pointed away from this Geordie accent, and
Yeah.
they were explicitly told to ignore that, pay no attention to that.
Yeah. And it's incredible.
And
And
I find it to be the same kind of thinking that gets the police, determined to force a confession at any cost.
hmm yeah, it definitely is. It's tunnel vision. Like a dog with a bone, they just won't give it up.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, they had these billboards all over the country, and they had what they called traveling displays with that info and no picture.
And they had flyers. They had these ads in the papers. They had them broadcast over the radio.
hmm
Because people were freaking out because the bodies were piling up, and the police
Yeah,
had nothing.
yeah, absolutely
They didn't
nothing.
even have a good plan.
Not at
I mean, they were
all.
spending a lot of money, they were putting in a lot of hours, but they had nothing. And the thing that this exposes is that, a lot of people have this belief that law enforcement protects people. They don't
hmm
really do that. Their job is to try and catch bad guys after they do things.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you
They
can't.
are a reactive force
Absolutely. And if they weren't, we would be
in a
going down
police
the
state.
rabbit hole of, yeah, totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
It's how the law has to be reacted.
it has to be reactive. You want it to be reactive, but there's this kind of imaginary thinking that they are out there to stop crime.
hmm
I mean, but on the other hand, I mean, there is a little bit of that tr- in truth, because studies show that the mere presence of foot patrolmen in a neighborhood causes the crime rate to go down.
hmm
So having a presence does that, but they don't prevent specific crimes from happening except by
No.
coincidence, happenstance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it isn't Minority Report.
No,
Uh,
no.
yeah.
So in a lot of ways, they are hampered by the fact that they have to kind of wait for another victim and hope that
Yeah.
the killer makes a mistake and leaves some evidence behind.
Oh, yeah. And to be fair, not all of these cops were incompetent. If you
No,
watch the Netflix special, I was very impressed with the one lieutenant who was on there, who was talking about when he interviewed people, he did everything that he could to make sure he didn't put words in their mouth.
right.
He took great pains to avoid that. And you just don't see that in a lot of police in this country.
That's a very conscientious and aware police officer, especially for the '70s, for heaven's sakes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the UK does have better laws regarding confessions than we do. For instance, it is illegal there for the police to lie to a defendant
Oh,
when they're under arrest.
Well, that's cool.
Uh, yeah, and as we know, that is a perfectly legal thing to do here.
Yep.
We talked about that last episode. Man, my mouth is dry.
It's really cold there, isn't it?
Uh,
Or it has
I
been.
honestly, yeah, for the most part, I don't know what the temp is outside now, but yeah, they put all these signs up, and throughout all of this, Sutcliffe is accumulating more and more and more victims. The But what really got it kicked into gear was that 16-year-old who was killed by him. And that's just, so sad. This girl wasn't a prostitute or anything. So that is what it took to get the public interested, sadly.
Yes.
Because, yeah, because like so many of these scenarios we've seen before, people just don't seem to think that working girls have rights. Makes me profoundly sad.
Where is where? What happened to her picture? Hey, come on. Oh, there it is. Jean. Um.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. It is. Um. It is a tremendous failing of the of journalism that they only react to certain types of victims
Hmm.
and they
Oh,
ignore
absolutely.
everything else. It's a huge failure.
Yeah.
Although I have so little respect for the media anyway.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, and I mean, absolutely, there's blood on their hands when it comes to that. But let's not forget about the police not
oh, oh,
doing all they
absolutely.
could with the prostitute angle, too.
Well, but they have this kind of symbiotic thing going on where um, the the death of this poor teenage girl causes a
Hmm.
national media storm, which then pulls funds into the police or forces the police to spend the money, much more money on this investigation than they had in the past
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
because of
I mean,
public
most
pressure,
definitely.
national public pressure.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sad because it's also not the first time we've seen it with, prostitutes being killed and, nobody really doing much
Well,
about it.
I mean, yeah, with Ridgway, it wasn't
Hmm.
until he dumped bodies in very public places that it got any attention at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And another example of them ignoring him, and one that we should probably do an episode on, Arthur Shawcross in New York, the Genesee River killer.
Mm, yeah.
And he was a character, that guy. But yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah, it's a class snobbery. Honest to God, that some lives are worth more than others,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is the last place that should have you know any whiff of that is in law enforcement. Law enforcement should value everybody equally, but they don't, especially
Yeah.
in the old countries where
Unfortunately.
where class is still a huge deal.
And yeah, and it's much more pervasive on the cultural mind in places like England than race is. Um, so I was just thinking about that. There was one black woman who was killed by Sutcliffe,
Yes, there was.
which we have her picture there. But there were quite a few of these white victims who lived in what they called Afro-Caribbean neighborhoods over there.
Oh yeah, and there was the police had this, this um, stereotype in their minds, this assumption that, you know, a woman from this area
Hmm.
who's out
Must be
at
of loose
night
morals.
by herself is a prostitute.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing too with the papers. They wouldn't directly say that, but what they would say was something like, "Oh, she was a party lady," or "Oh, she was a woman of loose morals,"
Right.
et cetera,
They
et
had
cetera.
euphemisms.
Yeah, quite a few of them. Um, but
I mean, to be fair, they were the police was correct that Sutcliffe was trying to target prostitutes. He just wasn't really especially accurate with it.
yeah,
I mean,
and
he
I
made his
wonder
own
how much of
assumptions. He
that.
made the same assumptions the police did.
Hmm. I wonder how much of that may be camouflaged as, or where he's camouflaging a hatred of women,
Mm,
period, and sort of sublimating it into this whole prostitute angle. But
quite possible. Yeah.
yeah, um, but we'll never know. He actually died this last November. Sutcliffe did.
Did he? In jail,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. In jail. He spent much of his time at Broadmoor Hospital over there in the
Okay.
UK. And I wonder if that's where Ian Brady met him. Because he did. Brady played chess with him a lot when
Yeah.
they were in prison. And they talked a lot, and he interviewed him for Gates of Janus. And like I said, Brady is sold on the idea that Sutcliffe was a paranoid schizophrenic with his delusions focused on religion.
Hmm.
Is basically what. What's interesting about that too, before he died, Sutcliffe, believe it or not, was baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah.
Well, might as
Yeah,
well. You
that's
don't
not
get
the
any
type of guy
birthday
you want
parties in
knocking at your
jail.
door. uh, would you like to hear the story of Christ with me? Man.
Well, see, if he had been religious in the beginning, you could almost see the Phillips head screwdriver as a cross symbol, right?
That's very true. I hadn't thought of that.
But that
And it
wasn't the
definitely
case.
is. Yeah.
What's fascinating also about his arrest was guess what? Another traffic stop.
Yep. What is it with serial killers and driving?
They're bad
Man.
drivers.
Uh,
They're bad. They're
wow.
bad drivers. Um,
It, we should
yeah.
make that a new stereotype.
I think I think
Trademark it or something.
I think that Ridgway was initially questioned because of a traffic stop, and he was another guy that the police interviewed several times
Wow.
before they finally were able to zero in on him.
Yeah. And it 9 times with Sutcliffe. It's incredible. But I
Yeah,
guess when you're dealing with enough papers to destroy a stone structure, that it's going to be a hell of a lot harder.
For sure. And, plus, what else doesn't help is when your superiors keep telling you to ignore suspects
Yeah.
because they
Oh,
don't fit
absolutely.
their preconceived notions.
Back into the detective's fallacy, myopia.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, nice. I honestly think that, had they had that lieutenant that I talked about in charge, I think that things might have been different. That he might have been put away faster. Sutcliffe, that is.
Well, just having an attitude of, you know, let's not exclude people yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not make assumptions yet, just yet.
Yeah. I mean, one big way that they also got onto Sutcliffe was one of the murder scenes where a 5-pound banknote was left.
All right,
It was it was a new banknote,
right.
so they were able to track the serial number to the business. It was Clark Transportation where he worked.
Yeah, and he worked there.
hmm And again, his boss and his colleagues were making fun of him by calling him the Yorkshire Ripper.
And they
Literally.
told the police this.
Yeah. Yeah, and they still didn't arrest him. Just, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And the Ripper moniker is also a tad bit misleading because he did, like we said, target the particularly the breasts and the genitalia of his victims, but there was only one that he actually disemboweled and
Yeah,
ripped,
yeah.
and that was closer to the end. So I think you could make the case that he was evolving that way, or escalating in that direction, to where again I think
Well, it was
Chikatilo provided a model of where he might have been
again
had he killed longer.
The Ripper moniker was applied by newspapers wanting to make some bucks off of this, uh, you know, a
Yeah,
catchy name for this killer.
yeah. Particularly trying to tap into the Jack the Ripper lore
Yep.
was a big reason why they chose that. Um, it wasn't accurate, really.
No, I mean he was not trying to emulate. He did not. He wasn't trying to replicate those crimes in any way at all.
No, no, and not at all. But yeah, and they caught him, they tried him, and they found him guilty. They did not buy the insanity defense.
Oh, they had to move it into London. They had to move the trial into London because the judge said there was like no chance he could get a fair trial in Yorkshire.
Yeah, yeah, they actually tried him in the Old Bailey,
And even
which
even the good people of London were smart enough to see through his bullshit. What I
yeah,
mean, even, but yeah,
yeah. For those who don't know what the Old Bailey is, if you ever watch V for Vendetta, it is the first building that is blown up in the movie to Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture. It's a pretty cool CGI explosions in that movie.
all right. The Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe,
Yep.
bad guy, and
Yeah, wannabe 80s werewolf.
bad police, but not like in the same sense of bad.
Yeah, not malevolent, just
No,
piss poor word.
yeah, a
Yep.
lot of incompetence there.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else to wrap it up?
I think we about covered it.
Sounds good.
Nothing from me.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.